Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, Instagram fam, friends and followers of as-Saafiy, and welcome to another episode of Revert Reflections. And generally, I don't like to carry a subtopic over to the next week, but we missed some sessions last week, and we never really closed out the topic of the child-parent relationship. And given the importance of this relationship and really trying to understand it and apply what we're understanding to our relationship with our children, we will be continuing that topic for at least the next couple of days. And as we attempt to close out that topic of the parent-child relationship, I want to close it out with a few words on relationship maintenance. And give some advices on how we can maintain the relationship between ourselves and our kids, and when that relationship is in crisis or when we reach an impasse, how can we get back on track? Brothers and sisters, it is quite common, I should say, for Muslim parents to feel that there is a disconnect between themselves and their children. And this disconnect obviously varies from household to household and even from child to child. The person has multiple children and finds that he's very connected with one of them or some of them, and finds that the connection between others amongst them or one of them is not as strong. So, for example, sometimes the disconnect between a parent and a child, or parents and a child, is very slight, which means that they are not able on some occasions or some instances or under certain circumstances, they find themselves not able to communicate freely, or they're not able to talk about certain subjects or some topics without reaching an impasse or without someone becoming upset. So that's slight. Generally speaking, very healthy, functioning relationship, but every now and again there's some topics we can't talk about. There are times where the child will seem withdrawn, distant, and then that passes, and we're right back on track. Very slight disconnect. And then sometimes the other side of the spectrum is where there's a total disconnect. And that's where a parent or parents feel like they live with a total stranger that you hardly know or have anything in common with, and you hardly talk about anything of substance with. We're not talking about, what do you want for breakfast? You need to go to sleep so you can get up early in the morning. You need to clean the restroom. We're not talking about things like that. We're talking about they can't talk about anything meaningful. They don't talk about anything meaningful. They don't do anything meaningful together. And if the parent were to be asked about the child in terms of what their interests are and what they like and what they're into and who their friends are, wouldn't really know. And vice versa, the child wouldn't know much about their parents because they don't have that type of connection. Brothers and sisters, in our faith, the child-parent relationship is the most important relationship after the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and we mentioned the ayah previously from Surah Al-Isra, verse number 23, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. He says, and your Lord has prescribed that you worship none besides Him, and that you are dutiful to your parents. So He mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the relationship between Him and our relationship with Him, and prioritize that relationship, and then follow it up with a relationship with the parents, as if to say, after the relationship with God, there's no relationship more important than the relationship with your parents. We also have the famous hadith collected by Bukhari Muslim on the authority of Abu Hurairah, in which Abu Hurairah said, a man came to the Prophet and said, Man ahaqqu nasi bi husni sahabati. He said, who amongst the people has the most right to my good companionship, to my good company, that I establish a strong connection with them? And the Prophet said, Ummuk, thumma ummuk, thumma ummuk, thumma abuk. He said, your mother, your mother, your mother, and then your father, your parents. Your parents are the ones who should be prioritized in terms of connecting with them. And so this child-parent connection, the only relationship which is more important than it, the only relationship we should strive to make stronger than it, is a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what is that teaching us? It's teaching us that we need, as parents, to actively strive to narrow the gap between ourselves and our kids, and to replace the feeling of disconnect with a deep and strong connection. That if we feel a disconnect, we just can't leave it like that. We can't just say, oh, well, that's just how it is. That's just how our relationship is. No, we have to strive to be connected to our kids. So now the question comes, obviously, well, how do we do that? And I do have a few suggestions based upon, obviously, what our religion teaches us, based upon the example of the Prophet ﷺ, but also based upon my own experience, to be honest with you, and the ups and downs I've had as a parent. And before I mention those suggestions, I want us to bear two things in mind. Two things I think it's very important for us to bear in mind. The first one is that times have changed. Things have changed. Our environment has changed. And kids have changed. And we as parents, in our parenting styles and approaches, have to adapt. So brothers and sisters, basically kids nowadays view the child-parent relationship very differently than most of us did growing up. When we were growing up, our philosophy, our approach, our mindset when it came to this parent-child relationship or child-parent relationship is that parents are your parents regardless. And they have to be treated as such regardless. And the relationship between us and them has to be maintained regardless. And so for us, the relationship between ourselves and our parents was highly durable. It was a very highly durable relationship. Could withstand almost anything. Why? Because we just had an understanding. My parents, they might be verbally abusive. My parents might not be the most dependable. My parents might have certain issues, certain moral issues, certain ideas about life and about behavior and about morals that I disagree with, but they're still my parents. And so I still have to maintain that relationship with them. Our relationships were highly durable, and our mindset and perspective on those relationships was very different than our kids nowadays. Nowadays, those relationships are far less durable. They are highly fragile, and kids are all too prepared to sever that relationship. And so we can't assume. We can't assume, based upon our own experience and our own perspective, that our relationship with our kids can withstand anything. And thus, because we think, just like my relationship with my parents, my relationship with my kids should be the same. It's going to be durable. It's going to withstand, whatever's going on. It's going to be to withstand that. We can't have that mindset and then be negligent as a consequence and fail to nurture our relationship with our kids. We become negligent. If they start to pull away, if we start to sense a disconnect, we say, at the end of the day, they're our kids. They're not going anywhere. No, they may go somewhere. They may physically move out of our space, or they actually, beyond physically moving out of our space, they may emotionally check out. They may totally cut us off. We talked about last week about being estranged from our kids, etc. And so it's critical for us not to be negligent. When we sense that disconnect, when we feel that disconnect, it is important for us to try to narrow that gap as soon as we possibly can. But the second point I wanted to make before closing out today is that it's important for parents to have at least a general understanding of child psychology. And what I mean by that, obviously we don't have to read a bunch of books on child psychology. We don't have to become experts on child psychology, but at least we have to understand that personalities and personality disorders, they form in childhood. And much of what we are doing, even inadvertently, could significantly impact the personalities of our kids and their abilities to be in functioning relationships. And we need to be aware, brothers and sisters, of all the things that we are doing and saying, and the trauma to which we are exposing our children, and how that affects them, how it affects them now as kids, how it affects them as they grow, and how it will affect them in adulthood. How will it affect them as individuals, and how it will affect their ability to be in functioning relationships, our ability to be in functioning relationships with them, how we may be doing and saying things which are undermining the ability for us to be in a functioning relationship with our kids. But beyond that, how what we're doing and saying and how we're treating our kids and interacting with our kids will affect their ability to be in functioning relationships with others, including their relationship with Allah. That many of us are noticing that our kids have no connection with Allah. Their connection with Allah is very what? Is very it's very trepid. It's something which is very fragile. It's something which is not strong. We're noticing this, and we have to understand that sometimes some things that we're doing and our interactions with them and our relationship with them is affecting their ability to be in a good relationship, a healthy relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are a couple of things that we need to bear in mind as we start to talk about some of the ways that we can maintain our relationship and practice relationship maintenance with our kids. More on this, brothers and sisters, in the coming days. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.